The Agenda with Steve Paikin is supported by the Ontario Real Estate Association. Ontario's 90,000 realtors are dedicated to finding a home for every Ontarian. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Realtors may say location, 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 but it seems voters are saying housing, housing, housing. Tonight we'll find out what 3 of the 4 parties have to say on that. First, we'll check in with Erin Kelly on how Polly sees Ontario's 43rd election shaping up. Also, why is the provincial government willing to go all the way to the Supreme Court to stop the release of Doug Ford's ministerial mandate letters? We'll get some insight on that. It's Tuesday, May 24th, and that's all next on the agenda. Holiday weekends are prime time for the campaign circuit, particularly one right after the party leaders' province-wide debate last week. Let's find out what the artificial intelligence known as Polly sees trending with, in the nation's capital, there's Erin Kelly, CEO of Advanced Symbolics Inc. Erin, I hope you had a good holiday weekend.
No, I got a big tree landed on my car, so it wasn't the most relaxing weekend. Actually,
no kidding.
Ottawa was pretty
wow.
hard.
I'm glad it only hit the car and not anybody in the family. That's the good news, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, okay, I'm not going to keep people in suspense anymore. Admittedly, we're still more than a week away from Election Day, but let's have the numbers. What's Polly saying about where things are at?
Well, it's a nail biter now in a sense. I mean, the PCs are still far ahead, but Doug Ford over the weekend slipped into minority territory for the first time, according to Polly. So he's at 62 seats. The Liberals are in second place with 31 seats, and the NDP in third place with 29 seats, and the Greens 1 seat still.
The Greens, Mike Schreiner, to keep his seat.
That's right.
That's right. Okay. So no pickup at this juncture in Parry Sound Muskoka, which the Greens see as their number 2 seat potentially?
We're not seeing that right now. No, it's really 1 seat for the Greens.
Okay. Now 63 is a majority, and you've got Doug Ford at 62 right now. So I guess the obvious question is, how firm do you think that is?
Not firm at all. So we have about 20 ridings in the province where the difference between the first and second candidate is less than 2%. So, and engagement is low. So we do expect a low voter turnout in this election. So it really is, it's a nail biter. Like in one of the ridings in Ontario, just to give you an example, in the GTA, it's 0.1% difference between the 2 leading parties. So it definitely can go into majority territory within the margin of error. Doug Ford does have a very good chance of forming a majority government, but it's definitely not in the bag, as they say.
Okay, why don't you take us through, you said 18 ridings where the difference between number 1 and number 2 candidate is 2%. Why don't you take us through and you tell me how many there are, the ridings where it's 1% difference, like it's just so neck and neck, it's so close. Which ones are they?
Okay, sure. I'm just going to look. I've got Polly here,
sure.
So I'm going to look. So the riding in the GTA that is, or in the province that is the closest right now, as I mentioned, it's just gone up to 0.2%. This is live, so it was 0.1% when I looked earlier. Don Valley North, followed by Oshawa, Beaches, East York, Scarborough Centre, Essex, Burlington, Mississauga, East Cooksville. Those 7 ridings are all less than 1% difference. So if you're sitting on the fence, you're at home and you're wondering, does my vote matter? It matters. Get out there and vote, because your vote can definitely make a difference. And then we have the next one up there, from there is Niagara Centre at 1.2%. So you can see this is very, very close election in many ridings.
And just to be clear, it's not always, say, PC or liberal PC. It might be in some cases liberal over New Democrat or New Democrat over liberal?
Absolutely. I mean, I can go through those as well, but I'm sure the people who live in those ridings probably have a sense of who's in the lead and who's in number 2 place, but we have them all kind of ranked, which ones are PC that are ahead by 0.2% and which ones are the NDP, that are just ahead and which ones are in second place. And in some cases, it's PC versus NDP. So, a very different vision
Well,
for your writing.
let me be completely arbitrary about this. And my pal who does the On Poly podcast with me, John Michael McGrath, he lives in Beaches, East York. So can you look up that one riding and see who's leading whom and by how much?
Beaches, East York, NDP is in first place, Liberals second place, and the difference is 0.2%.
Wow. Okay. That is tight. Can you tell at this juncture as well, Erin? I mean, it's obvious Ford's in first. Of the opposition parties, Liberals or New Democrats, has either one of them created any momentum to speak of at this point, to the point where they're the obvious challenger?
That's the problem in this election. It's really, normally in an election, it's an election about ideas, and the leaders are coming with platforms that really excite the population. And the challenge with this election is that the population, what is of concern to the population, affordability, inflation, the population doesn't feel that a premier of the province can really do much about these issues that concern them. Now, they are concerned about education, of course, and healthcare, but those are kind of longer term concerns, and they're not really exciting people or driving them to get engaged. So this is really an election about people feeling we're going to be going through tumultuous times, possibly another recession, and who is the steady hand, the least risky person that can get us through these tumultuous times. And right now, people feel that Doug Ford has been steering the province through tumultuous times for, at least two and a half years now. So the feeling is, why rock the boat? Why put in somebody who doesn't have experience being a premier? That's basically what we're seeing. So that even when, and now Stephen Del Duca has had great momentum. He's, his party had 7 seats, and now he's looking to form possibly the official opposition. So he's done a great job in getting people sort of excited about what he has to say. But at the end of the day, it's really not about that. It's about, we're nervous, we're scared. We definitely see that in the population, and we want somebody who's going to just steer us through a difficult time.
Again, people are going to be able to tell we didn't set any of this up ahead of time because, the numbers are changing as you look right now. I think it's pretty safe to say Doug Ford's going to win his riding. Andrea Horwath is going to win hers. You've just told us Mike Schreiner is likely to win his. Stephen Del Duca's is the big guess. Can you look right now and see where Vaughan Woodbridge is right now? Because it's in the 905, therefore you'd think the Conservative was in the lead, but he used to represent it, and so who knows? Maybe there's a bit of a sympathy vote for him there. What's it showing?
Ooh, he's in the lead, but 2.2% with the PCs in second place. So actually that's pretty close for a leader of the party. That's
tight, but the Conservatives think they're going to win it, and they've got a cabinet minister there named Michael Tobolo who's hoping to hold it. So 2.2% Liberal lead at the moment with 9 days to go. Stay tuned, as they say. Okay, Erin, let me pivot here, as they also say, and ask you about an issue that I know has had a great deal, at least in my social media feeds, it's got a lot of traction, but I don't know if quote unquote real people actually give a damn about this. And that is the sort of Tories peekaboo campaign style. Doug Ford's not doing any one-on-one interviews anywhere. Most of his candidates don't show up for all candidates debates in the riding. They're certainly not showing up on this program, providing Conservative candidates in which to participate in debates with other party nominated candidates. Can you tell whether there's any uptick on that issue on social media and whether people care?
There definitely is. We've definitely seen people say, this candidate did not show up in my riding. I sent this candidate emails and I didn't get a response. And it is annoying people. And I would say in those ridings where it's close, it might be enough to just push it in one direction or another. Now, in order to really evaluate the effect of that, of course, though, we'd have to do the counterfactual in statistics, which is if Doug Ford did allow his candidates to speak, what might they say? And that's a tricky one because we are seeing when you have low engagement, the people who come out to vote. Now, there's 2 types of voters. Conservatives tend to vote, so that favors Doug Ford. But angry people also tend to vote. And in an election where there's low voter turnout, some of the people who do come out are people who are upset. And we are definitely, one of the things we're seeing here, a really interesting indicator in this election is that women our 12%, the engagement of women is 12% higher than the engagement of men in this election. That's unusual. We don't usually see that kind of delta. It's where the men are kind of ho-hum, but the women are angry in some cases. And so in those ridings where things are close, if the candidate is not showing up and not going door to door and not being responsive, we are seeing that people are talking about it, and they're talking about it in those close ridings. So that actually could have an impact. And with the Conservatives being on the cusp of a majority government, that actually could cost them the difference between a majority and a minority. But we'll have to see how strongly people feel about that versus the fear they feel about the economy going forward, which does tend to favor Conservatives.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, because I wonder whether all of the chat on social media I assume all the chat on social media I see complaining that Ford's candidates aren't showing up for all candidates debates and that the Premier's running a peekaboo campaign. I assume that's all among people who wouldn't vote for him in the first place. Are you saying this is an issue that potentially could affect undecided voters and therefore hurt him?
Yes, I mean, the majority of it would be people who weren't going to vote for him in the first place, and they are putting through a lot of the traffic. But Polly is able to determine, because she's looking at the same people over the course of a year, she is able to determine which people are most likely Liberal and NDP supporters and which people are Conservative supporters. And Conservative people tend to have a lot of respect for the democratic process. That's why they vote regardless of how motivated they're feeling or how excited they're feeling about the election. And so when a candidate doesn't show up, it also tends to bother that type of voter more than it would perhaps sometimes a Liberal or an NDP supporter, or somebody who's got less of that strong conviction. So gotcha. It's dangerous, but at the same time, because it's Doug Ford's election to lose, it also might be the right decision. Because if one of his candidates were to say something, for example, on the abortion issue, whatever, with women being so engaged in this election, it could also be very detrimental. So it's hard to say which is worse at this point.
Let me follow up on that, because you mentioned in one of our prior conversations, might be 2 weeks ago already, that because of the leaked decision from the Supreme Court in the United States overturning Roe versus Wade, you were seeing a great deal of engagement on that issue in this election campaign among women who were nervous that because of the social conservative part of Ford's coalition, that could be an issue here. You still picking that up?
We're still picking that up. It hasn't ignited because there's been no gaffes. There's no reason to really believe that the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party that there's a risk that they will change abortion policy in Ontario. But it's definitely being discussed in social media, perhaps more so with the federal Conservative leadership race. We're definitely seeing high engagement there, but that trickles down into the Ontario election as well. But it's not as strong because there's been nothing that's really ignited it. Right,
and we should say for the record, Doug Ford has said the United States Supreme Court has zero jurisdiction over Ontario. There will be no changes on that issue here as long as he's the Premier. So we put that on the record for what it's worth. Let me ask you about a video. Okay, this was something that happened before the leaders' debate. And none of us in particular who were inside this studio involved in the leaders' debate necessarily knew that it was happening at the same time right outside the studio, 50 meters away that way. But there was an incident, and there were a couple of demonstrators who got, well, I got to be careful what language I use here, but they either got beaten up or roughed up or, arrested rather vigorously by some security and or law enforcement at the time. A, has Polly picked that up? B, if she did, what did she find?
Yes, she picked it up. And what she found was two things. Number one, there wasn't a lot of engagement on this issue. The engagement that did take place was almost entirely Liberal and NDP supporters who were passing the video around, commenting on it, very, very upset about it. Only of the 3% of people who noticed the video, only a few, I think it was something like 2% who were against it, were progressive conservative voters. And of those, Polly determined that 8.6% of those were going to change their vote because of that video. So really a very, very small part, right? 2% of 3%. 8.6%. So it wasn't enough to change the seat counts. I would say the peekaboo effect is having more of an effect on the Conservative vote than that video did.
Okay, we got about a minute and change to go here, Erin, so let me ask you one last thing. You know, it's really unfortunate for the NDP and the Green campaigns that both of their leaders came down with COVID last week, and it's taken them off the hustings at a really inopportune time. Does Paulie pick anything up about whether or not that's having an impact on their campaigns?
This is fascinating. Andrea Horwath's seat count went up when she got COVID, and it's because of COVID, not because of the leaders' debate. This was really interesting. We were surprised by this, so we went and looked into it. What happened when Andrea Horwath got COVID is the NDP party still had the gatherings. People were still going out into the communities. In some cases, Jagmeet Singh was showing up. So the people who like going to those events were still engaged, and they tend to be, you know, NDP supporters anyway, so the people came out. But the people who don't like going to those things were able to see Andrea Horwath online, apparently, and engage with the NDP party that way. She was giving interviews from her home, I guess it was, and we saw people talking about that. So people got actually more engaged with Andrea Horwath while she had COVID, and she was able to talk about how, you know, she's feeling sick and the pandemic's not over, and she really got she got some sympathy, and so it actually worked in her favor. With Mark Schreiner, it's hard to say whether it was the leaders' debate because he really rode high over that debate, but his popularity continues to grow, I think, off of that debate. So we have not seen that it has harmed either one of them. That getting COVID has really been something that's, in fact, it's probably benefited Andrea Horwath.
Erin, thanks so much for this, and holy smokes, getting interesting. We'll talk again next week.
Thanks, Steve.
Affordability has consistently tracked as the top election issue, and housing is almost always the biggest ticket item in most household budgets. Politicians on the hustings are facing tough questions, and every platform puts it front and center. So we're pleased that 3 of the 4 major parties put forward candidates for us to take a substantial look at what their parties want to do if they win office. And they are, in order of precedence in the last House, former Toronto City Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam, now the NDP candidate in Toronto Centre; Chi Weung, the Liberal candidate for Spadina-Fort York; and the Green Party's housing critic and candidate in Parry Sound, Muskoka, there's Matt Richter. We welcome all of you to our program, and of course, as we've had to say more than once, unfortunately, on this program, we have no Conservative candidate tonight because the Tories, well, they pretty much decline every invitation to participate in these little exercises in what we like to call democracy, and as we say in my hometown of Hamilton, c'est la vie. Anyway, we're delighted that the 3 of you could be with us today. Let's just start by going through rental housing. And I'm going to ask our director, Sheldon Osmond, to bring up the platforms that each of you are pitching to the electorate. As it relates to rent control and vacancy control, the Progressive Conservatives would continue their policy of no rent controls for buildings built since they won the last election in 2018. The Liberals would enact rent control everywhere, but no vacancy control. The NDP would enact rent control and vacancy control, as would the Greens. Why don't we just start, and I guess, Kristen, protocol suggests I should start with you. Why don't we start by having you tell us, first of all, for those that don't know, the difference between rent control and vacancy control. We'll start there, and then I'll follow up with something else.
Thank you very much, Steve, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. Rent control can probably be simply defined as limiting the landlord's ability to raise the rent above the guidelines. So there's stipulated guidelines that are established every single year, and the rent control will mean that landlords are not allowed to do that. Vacancy control is something different. It actually ensures that the rent that the previous tenant paid is the rent that the next tenant will pay. So therefore, we actually control the vacant unit in between tenancy as well, which is actually the holy grail when it comes to real, true rent control and vacancy control. And I'm very proud that the NDP has that in this platform.
Because sometimes when one tenant moves out before the next one moves in, they'll knock the rent up double digits because nobody's there at that moment. I get you. Why don't you follow up on that then, Kristen, and tell us why you think the NDP has the best platform on offer as it relates to this?
And this is really truly where we want to be able to sort of break off who's going to tackle this issue with its full intensity, with the purpose of getting to a good outcome, which is to protect tenant rights. So the NDP platform obviously has those two planks, and it's good to know that the Greens have it as well. One of the big pieces that I've observed as a city councillor for my 12 years in municipal government at the city is largely the fact that we had opportunities from the previous provincial governments, both the Liberals and Conservatives, where they had the opportunity to tackle this issue, rent control, vacancy decontrol, and neither one of them has. And I think it's critically important is that right now we're seeing a rising number of landlords behaving badly. They have now been incentivized to actually remove their tenants through rent evictions or bad faith behavior, such as requests to bring back the occupancy of the unit for what they call personal use, which is permitted. But what we've seen is that once those units are taken away from the tenants, so you've taken away their homes, they find those listings now on Airbnb. So another plank of our platform is to actually regulate Airbnb, have a style of control and registry across the province, which is critically important. And all of those measures, along with the ability to reform the landlord-tenant tribunal, bring back in-person hearings, which the Ford government did away with, as well as putting the 30% back into the legal aid budget, which again the Tories did away with, is going to ensure that tenants will have more access and more rights in Ontario, and their rights will be better protected.
All right, Chi, why don't you follow up on that and say why you think the Liberals are pitching the best plan?
Thanks very much, Stephen, and thank you for the opportunity to share our Ontario Liberal plan around housing, the housing crisis. I think it's really important when we look at the larger context and what's happening. It's really clear that Doug Ford broke his promises in the last election. He said he wasn't going to remove rent controls, and so we've seen them break that promise and remove the rent controls, which means that people have been really stuck. And we get text messages from people who live in Spadina, Fort York, who are absolutely terrified that their landlord, who's just reached out to them, are going to try and increase the rent. So that measure that we want to bring back is rent controls across the board for rental units, and we want to be making sure that we've got other paths for people in terms of the ability to think about renting to own and other options that give people an option in this housing market. I think one of the features that's really important is that we want to create stability in the rental market, and so the vacancy decontrol piece, doesn't necessarily allow us to do that. We want to make sure that the stock is there and available and managed in those ways.
Matt, what say you?
Yeah, and thank you. The lack of affordable rent continues to be at crisis level, and the Ontario Greens recognize that. And we also recognize how this has deep negative implications towards our healthcare system, our education system, our local economy. And it continues to be at crisis level. And we see this in examples up here in Parry Sound, Muskoka, where the current rent for a one-bedroom apartment is between $1,500 and $1,800. So by bringing in rent control and vacancy control, absolutely, this is a step that we need to work across party lines and bring real action on.
So I'm not surprised to hear that in downtown Toronto, rent is a massive issue, but you're saying even in the so-called hinterland of Parry Sound, Muskoka, this is a big deal as well?
Correct. And that's why it's been so difficult for our local healthcare systems and our local businesses to find employees, to find staffing. They actually cite this both in the healthcare and economic sector as their number one issue is the lack of available staff, because people can't afford to live here, so they certainly can't afford to work here.
Chi, let me follow up with you. In as much as the Greens and the NDP have both got rent controls and vacancy controls on, the one point of departure for you two is the Liberals, who do not have vacancy control on. How come?
Well, we got some very clear signals from experts and partners that would actually help to destabilize the market. And so we really want to make sure that we're shoring up as much rental stock as possible. And so that's why we've taken this sort of more balanced and measured approach, is hearing from the experts to say, that the vacancy control is going to take away some of the supply that's out there.
All right. Kristen, I'll follow up with you in this regard. I understand that you want to represent a downtown Toronto constituency where there are obviously far more tenants than there are apartment building builders. But the reality is, do you not have to offer something to the people who build these units, or they're not going to build them? Have you got too much disincentive to landlords in your plan?
No, actually, that's not the case at all. I think that what we have is the Liberal government consulting with industry experts, so-called builders, because they're the ones who are probably telling them, don't implement vacancy decontrol. But if you speak to tenants across the city of Toronto, you speak to tenants across Ontario, they're going to tell you that they need vacancy control, because right now the landlords and the building owners are being incentivized to kick out tenants. And that's exactly what the NDP is trying to stop. And with respect to broken promises, I think, obviously Doug Ford broke his promise when he said that he would not allow anyone to fall into homelessness when he ran in for office in 2018. But we also saw the Liberal government in 2003 break their promise to really bring back real rent control. And they had 15 years to do that, which they haven't done until the very last few years with then Premier Kathleen Wynne, but they had 12 years of unregulated markets. And everybody who lived in an apartment unit that was built in 1991 had no rent control, no protections, and that is part of the Liberal legacy.
All right, well, obviously, Chi, you were not there then. You're running for the first time now, so let's give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is important to recognize that everybody knows that we are in a very different housing challenge and crisis right now. And of course, hearing about the affordability challenges across the province, right? And so, from Hamilton to Parry Sound, as we just discussed, Prince Edward County, this is an across-the-board issue, and that's why we want to make sure that we are doing what we can. And an opportunity to bring back rent controls is the approach that we think is going to give us the ability to kind of stabilize the market. And that's the approach that we think is really measured and focuses on making sure that the stock and the supply is there and keeping that balance. And if we're not looking back to 2002, 2003, we're in a very different era. And right now, it was the last Liberal government that brought in those strong rent control measures in 2017. And Doug Ford really took those away from us. And so after having made that promise, to me, it's really egregious that, the Conservatives aren't here and having the conversation with us about how they're actually protecting Ontario residents.
All right, let's move from rent controls to housing supply. And to that end, I'm going to ask our director, Sheldon Osmond, to bring up the next graphic, which talks about what the four major parties have on offer. For the Progressive Conservatives, their last budget suggested 1.5 million new homes over 10 years would be their plan. The Liberals have the same. The NDP have the same. The Greens have a slightly different plan here. They want 182,000 so-called community housing units over the 10-year period of time. And Matt, that makes me want to start with you because you're a little bit different from the others, and maybe you could explain to us why.
No, and thank you. We too recognize the need for the 1.5 million homes over the next decade. At the same time, the priority is towards the affordable housing crisis and finding these solutions. Of that 182,000, 100,000 would be affordable housing units. 60,000 are specific permanent units that have wraparound mental health services, so that supportive infrastructure is in place. And 22,000 would be dedicated towards the Indigenous communities of our province, and it would be an urban-rural Indigenous-led strategy, so that we're looking at the whole picture there, but still recognizing the 1.5 million home target along with the other three parties.
So that extra bit that you just referred to, you think that distinguishes your housing plan from the other three major parties?
Well, it does, because this is being an ongoing crisis. Even in the last election when I ran, we saw that the affordable housing crisis wasn't getting the action and the attention it deserved. And we see solutions throughout our riding and across the province that sometimes don't need, obviously it needs funding. And this is about priorities. We know the government needs to get back into the business of affording the right measures and the right financing so that our nonprofits, our co-ops can get on with being part of the solutions. Our developers have the right incentives. And again, we come back to why are we talking about the Conservatives building a multi-billion-dollar highway, sprawlway, if you will, when the housing issue is at a crisis level and we know where the priorities are. We've heard it from voters across this province.
I'm going to mark you down as being against Highway 413. Have I got that right?
You sure do. And
I
the Bradford bypass while we're at it.
And the Bradford bypass, too. Okay. Since you're all basically agreeing to match what the Conservatives have promised in their April 28th budget, Let me, and Chi, why don't you start here? I guess the question at this point then becomes, you're all pledging to build a lot of new homes, and we don't even know if this is possible. What makes you think we can actually do 1.5 million homes over the next decade?
Yeah, it's an ambitious and a really important target, and I really want to thank the folks at More Neighbors and several other advocacy groups that I think have really helped us in the conversation to move us along. I think all the parties were encouraged by More Neighbors to set this ambitious target. And so for me, the mechanism that's really important, that's part of our plan, is the creation of the Ontario Home Building Corporation. The focus for that agency, this new public agency, like a Metrolinx, is to actually do the work of financing and building more housing. And that's going to be deeply affordable housing. We're targeting 138,000 units of deeply affordable housing, 22,000 Indigenous-led, 78,000 social housing, and 38,000 supportive housing, with additional operating funds to support the community agencies that do the work around the supportive housing piece. We know that that's so important right now. And so as we build that out, we want to emphasize that we want to see housing built along the transit corridors. We're investing billions, as we should do, in the transit infrastructure that we desperately need in this province, that we really, delayed for many years on. And so I'm very, very proud of both the transit investments and the housing investments. And we know that, that every dollar that we put into building these investments, making these choices, brings back $1.40 into the economy. Coming out of World War II, what did we do well in this country? We built cars and we built houses. And so coming out of the pandemic, our opportunity is to make smart public investments in a way that's really going to drive our opportunities to create the housing and the transit that we need. And over the last couple of years, Ford in the last election promised that he would bring that affordability to us. And we've seen the housing prices jump by $500,000 over this past 4 years. What we want to commit to is doubling the pace of construction than it currently is at the moment. And that's not something that the Ford government has invested in their budget. They have not put those measures in. Our budget and our plan makes the commitments right away for us to try and double the supply and that build in as the first go.
All right, Kristen, do we even have the people power to meet these very ambitious targets?
Well, we're certainly going to have to build that. The capacity of the construction industry has to be scaled up, as well as the ability to lift some land use planning controls, which is what is going to be so helpful with the NDP platform, is that we're committing to ending exclusionary zoning in too many neighborhoods across Ontario. There is a restriction of the type of housing that can be built, and we need to be able to build more duplexes, fourplexes, triplexes, sixplexes, and so forth. We need to be able to incentivize the developers so that therefore they're not sitting on approvals. And oftentimes in the city of Toronto, by way of example, we approve about 28,000 units of housing every single year through the planning pipeline, and only half of those are ever pulled with respect to building permits. So the NDP will also introduce a tax that says if you don't use your planning approvals, you're going to lose it. And we know that there's a lot of money and costs and time that goes into getting those approvals. So we want those developers to actually start doing that. The other thing I think is critically important is to make sure that we have inclusionary back online. One thing that we have seen the Ford government do is weaken inclusionary zoning. The Liberal government delayed the inclusionary zoning request from municipalities. So it's not just about increasing the supply, which is absolutely critical, and we're able to do that, but the 1.5 million homes across the 10 years. But also we are going to be building a brand new corporation called Ontario Housing that will commit to building 500,000 units of RGI units, which are rent geared to income units, so it's deeply affordable. They're also not market. Going to make a huge dent, especially when it comes to affordability. So our platform is costed, it is balanced, it actually meets the needs for those who are trying to get into the rental market. So therefore it's affordable for them. But also we have a plan for first-time home buyers.
Okay, well, hold off on that. We're going to get to first-time. We're going to get to first-time buyers in a moment. But since you've mentioned zoning, that nicely segues us into the next segment, because that's exactly where we want to go now. Sheldon, again, I'll ask you to bring the graphic up, because here's what the four major parties have on offer as it relates to zoning and housing density. The PCs would establish a community infrastructure and housing accelerator. I'd love to know more about what that means, but of course, there's no one here to tell me. The Liberals talk about scrapping ministerial zoning orders, those MZOs that have been somewhat controversial over the last 4 years, and they would extend so-called as-of-right zoning. The NDP, as you just heard Kristen touch on, would end exclusionary zoning and encourage basement and laneway suites. And the Greens would end exclusionary zoning and encourage homes to be split into multiple units. All right, Chi, why don't you start us on this round? Scrapping the MZOs, why is that important?
Yeah, I think it's a really important dimension of our platform. You know, if it's really important, you're going to name it and spell it out in our platform. And we've seen the Ford government time and time again overuse this particular mechanism. They've used the MZOs 60 times over the last 4 years. You know, that's a huge number of times in which they've decided to override community input and community consultation, as well as environmental protections. You know, we've seen this happening certainly in our community downtown. And for me, what's important is that we've named it and we've put a strong suggestion forward of what we would like in its place, a rules-based measure that focuses on allowing the province to do that for not-for-profit housing, for long-term, like public long-term care homes. So the kinds of things that we need in our communities that serve public good. And so for us, you know, ending MZOs is one of the important tools that we want to make sure we put in place to help manage this. And you talked a little bit about our exclusionary zoning process.
Well, hang on a sec before you get there, Chi, because I just want to make sure people understand MZOs, ministerial zoning orders, are basically where the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing sort of comes in, as he would say, on his horse to the rescue, and essentially can either emphasize or overturn the decision of a local council as it relates to a particular zoning approval. And they've done that a lot, and you and others have said it's the wrong thing to do. Okay, I just want to put that background in place. Now finish your thought, if you would.
Thanks. And I think it's really important, you know, we're starting to describe our approach to exclusionary zoning, you know, that as a right piece for us is really important. We spoke to municipalities and local leaders to really understand what we need. And we want to make sure there's a commitment for, you know, two-story as of right, as well as laneways and that kind of approach in our mix to help with the missing middle. So these are the kinds of things that are really critical. And I can't believe that, you know, there was probably a 4-week stretch where every week at the doors, we had people pointing at us and sort of saying, like, where are you on exclusionary zoning? And of course, we couldn't reveal the platform at that point. But this is like, exclusionary zoning is like a very tactical in the weeds piece, but to hear young people at the door saying, where's your leadership here? Like, we are all waiting for strong, good leadership and government to show up for our communities. As a young person myself, like I know how people are really feeling the sense of abandonment from governments, and it's time for governments to really listen to communities. And this is one area I think we've been shown up really effectively. You know, and of course, all the parties are nodding to it, but we've done the work to, you know, figure out what the path forward can look like by consulting with municipal partners and engaging with partners to understand what's going to work and how do we get moving on it.
Okay, let me get Matt then. I mean, one of the reasons that none of this stuff has happened yet is that there are definitely two different kinds of people who want homes. There are the people who want in but aren't in, and there are the people who are in who don't necessarily want these changes because they like things the way they are. Matt, I want to know what it's going to take I guess you're advocating this, for your advocacy to be able to convince those who are in that they need to broaden their vistas a little bit. How's that going to work?
Well, no, that's a great point, and I believe it already has been in place and working in terms of how the Green Party has shaped the policies of the other parties, and we're always proud to see our policies getting adopted, and this just shows how important it is to work across party lines. We must continue to share out these sensible solutions as to what's required to get people into home ownership or rent that they find reasonable. And when we look at exclusionary zoning or just other policies, we're looking at, it has to be big picture policy where across Ontario, you can go from one area to the next and have a deep and easy access to the understanding as to what the rules and regulations are and that they're consistent. We have so many scenarios up here in our riding, and I've heard this across Ontario, where we have elderly who are still living in their a significant sized house. One example is a lady here in Huntsville, 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom. She's on her own, unfortunately, but she can't sell because there's nowhere for her to go. And meanwhile, there's a young family with one child and one on the way who are living in a one-bedroom apartment. So this is a crisis of bad public policy as well, where we aren't setting the conditions in place where developers, co-ops, nonprofits can be part of the solution, because they often complain that they're bogged down by unnecessary, outdated regulations. We need to do better so that sometimes the solutions that are right in front of us can be accessed.
Kristen, I'll preface this question by saying you, having just left Toronto City Council, would be very well aware of the fact that there's a subway line that goes from east to west across Toronto, and despite the fact these are significant nodes of transportation, there are bungalows scattered all the way along. And anytime anybody tries to get more density near a subway station, for goodness sakes, the local council or the local councillor or the local residents will say, nope, we don't like more density, we like it just the way it is. How does anybody make progress on this file?
Probably two pieces. I can tell you that the NDP platform is the housing platform is embedded on a principle of housing as a human right. So we start with that as a foundational piece, and then we build the policies over that. So that also means that we're building transit-oriented developments. So therefore, we direct growth where growth is intended, and growth is intended along transit lines. In downtown Toronto, as you can tell, we've got lots of tall towers, but we also have access to mass transit. So that makes sense. We need to be able to use the housing as a human right principle to overcome some of those objections. And I think language is important. So when we talk about exclusionary zoning, we talk about who's not included, but we also need to describe it as the missing middle, which is what the More Neighbour folks have been talking about. It's not something that we should be coming late to. It's something that we should embrace, and it's something that's very centrally promoted within our platform. The other component, of course, is that there are opportunities to draw sort of a radii around the station, the transit station, that says that if you're within this sort of radii of space, you should be able to get more density. And that is something that's also obviously part of our platform. It actually limits us from urban sprawl. It helps us protect very valuable farmland and agricultural land. And of course, Doug Ford has tried 3 times now to breach the green belt, and he's been caught. But those are some of the big pieces that we would be putting forward. So we would work with the municipalities to ensure that they have the opportunities to reform their local planning controls, and we would be a partner in assisting them.
All right, we've got 4 minutes to go here, and let's see if we can sneak in one more area for discussion, and that is first-time home buyers, which Kristen talked about a moment ago. As for the Progressive Conservatives, I don't believe there's anything in their platform that speaks to the first-time home buyer, so we'll just leave that one blank. The Liberals would create a new Ontario Home Building Corporation, OHBC, to finance and build new affordable homes. The New Democrats talk about loans of up to 10% for first-time home buyers. And the Greens talk about a down payment support program for first-time buyers. Okay, Kristen, why don't you pick up on that and tell us what you like about the NDP plan?
I'm very excited about our platform, especially when it comes to this. Like, for a lot of young families, they're struggling to make ends meet, but they're also struggling because of the cost of housing is too high. And we all know that there is the opportunity for dreaming of owning their own home, growing their families. So, this is a very ambitious plank of part of our housing platform, is to provide a 10% down payment for those who are making less than $200,000. So if you qualify for that, we will provide you the 10% down payment. It's a net revenue sort of a situation for us, because when that person moves or when they sell, those monies go back into the coffers so that we can loan it out again to the next home, so the next family who requires it.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. Forgive me, I'm going to stop you there because I want to make sure we get time before we have to go for everybody. Chi, your view on the Liberal plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Ontario Home Building Corporation is going to be a really interesting and important vehicle for us to achieve some of those targets, to make sure that all of the homes we're building through that mechanism, that 138,000 that I mentioned, are targeted to first-time buyers. If we're financing with public dollars, we need to make sure that people who need it most have a shot at it. And, I want to also make a nod to the Bill of Rights that's happening federally, and how we want to partner with our federal partners to make sure that we're doing that and bringing home inspections into the mix. And Kristen actually helped me buy my home, and the home inspector actually missed something really critical. There was flooding in my basement, and I had an $8,000 bill that came a few months later. These are the kinds of things that we want to make sure that first-time home buyers have access to, is real protections from our governments in terms of that first-time buying experience. So we want to take a look at reforming blind bidding, and we want to make sure that people who are interested and are using the ability to sort of rent to own. There's an amazing program called Options for Homes. That's the kind of model that we need to explore.
Okay, thanks, Chi. And Matt, your view.
No, and just to add to that, absolutely banning the blind bidding process, and of course making home inspections mandatory. I think what's so important is that the public continues to hear how dire the situation is for first-time home buyers. The recent stat came out that it's approximately 20 years for the typical couple or individual to afford a down payment. And that just shows how, as an example, how difficult this situation is. And on top of that, we must bring action towards this, as it's approximately 25% of homes being bought right now in the GTA are being bought by people who already own 2 or more houses. And so that's just driving this continuous downward spiral of a lack of affordable housing. So all of this compiled with the sensible solutions across party lines is the way we're going to get it done. Okay,
get it done. You really want to use that expression? I think somebody else has got that patented. Anyway, well, I got a minute left here, and I want to point out that the NDP held Toronto Centre in the last House, and Kristen, I know you're trying to keep it there. The NDP held Spadina Fort York in the last House, and Chi, I know you are trying to move it over to the red team. Matt, you are running for, let me see, 2007, 11, 14. Is this your 5th run at this seat?
It is, Steve, and I recall being down here one time to talk education, but this is my 5th run at it, and the momentum's strong, very strong up here. Okay,
well, this is what I want to know. In our last 20 seconds here, you're running in one of what has traditionally been one of the safest Conservative seats in the whole province. What makes you think you can move it into the green column?
Well, since Norm Miller, a very respectful and honorable politician, decided to retire, people saw this as an opportunity for change. And this has become an election against license plate sticker bribes and buck of beer, because that's not getting the job done. And the people of Parry Sound Muskoka are looking for positive change with honesty and integrity. And that's what's fueling this massive surge in our support.
Gotcha. I want to thank the 3 of you for coming onto our program tonight. Kristen Wong-Tam for the NDP, Chi Ryung for the Liberals, Matt Richter for the Greens. Thanks, and stay safe on the hustings for what's left of this 43rd general election campaign.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
The provincial government really does not want the public to read the cabinet mandate letters written in 2018 by the then newly elected government led by Doug Ford. Last week, we found out their case will go before the highest court in the land. With us to explain what's going on, from the beaches in Ontario's capital city, there's James Turk, director of the Centre for Free Expression at the former Ryerson University, now called Toronto Metropolitan University. James, good to see you again. How are you managing?
I'm fine, thanks. Nice to be with you, Steve.
A pleasure to have you. Just for those who are coming to this story new, what's a mandate letter?
A mandate letter is directions that a premier or a prime minister gives to each member of his or her cabinet as to their priorities in the coming year.
Now, recently, and by that I mean Kathleen Wynne in the previous Ontario government and Justin Trudeau in the current federal government, have released their mandate letters, their marching orders to the cabinet ministers. Doug Ford has chosen not to. Do you know why?
I don't. It's puzzling. One would think, as Kathleen Wynne and Justin Trudeau felt, that you want the public to know what the government's priorities are in each of its for each of its ministers, and they proudly trumpet them. So all of us were a bit taken aback in 2018 after Doug Ford was elected, when the CBC's request for access to the mandate letters was refused by Cabinet Office as a violation of cabinet confidentiality.
Now, having said that, there is no law or legal obligation that requires them to do that, right?
No, but all governments, and Doug Ford is quoted repeatedly as saying that he's a strong believer in transparency. As a value in Canada, we want our governments to be transparent so the public can be informed and can exercise its proper democratic oversight of what governments do. So there's every reason to release them, although there's no obligation to do so.
I know you're not a lawyer, but is it reasonable to argue, as they are, that mandate letters are all part of cabinet confidentiality? We don't release what ministers say about various topics at the cabinet table, and this is merely an extension of that.
That is the argument the Ontario government is making, and it's an argument that I think is wrong, but it's also an argument that the Information Privacy Commissioner of Ontario felt was wrong. It was an argument that the Divisional Court that reviewed the Information Privacy Commissioner's decision felt was wrong, and it's the decision that the Ontario Court of Appeal felt was wrong.
Now, what in particular concerns you about, I know you don't know the reasons why they're refusing to make these letters public, but what potentially concerns you about why they might not be making these public?
My concern is less what might be hidden in the particular documents and more, I think that we have a government that really doesn't believe in transparency and is using the exception for cabinet confidentiality to include a lot of things that are not properly part of cabinet confidentiality. I mean, if I could just explain, it is important for members of cabinet to be able to freewheel, to discuss ideas, to try out, proposals, to respond in different ways, and not to be held publicly accountable for what they may say in these brainstorming sessions. So that there's a proper protection for cabinet confidentiality for that process, but not for the outcomes of it. What's protected in the law, Section 12.1 of the Act, says that they're not to release records that disclose the substance of deliberations in cabinet. The transcript of what was said in cabinet, for example, could never be disclosed. But mandate letters are not that. Mandate letters, according to the testimony in the court trials, didn't even go to cabinet, much less reveal the deliberations that took place in cabinet.
Now, give us some of the legal history here. Why is this before the Supreme Court of Canada now?
Well, when the government of Ontario refused to give these to the CBC has a right to appeal a decision under the Access to Information legislation to the Information and Privacy Commissioner. And in this case, rather than one of the staff of the commission writing the response, it was the commissioner himself, and he directed the government to turn it over. The government appealed this, went to judicial review in the Ontario Divisional Court, and the judges in that case decided that no, the Information Privacy Commissioner was correct. It had to be turned over. So the Ontario government appealed it to the Ontario Court of Appeal. And the Ontario Court of Appeal, in a majority decision, decided no, the letters did have to be turned over. So now the Ontario government sought its last option, which was to seek leave to appeal to the Supreme Court, which was granted, and now it's before the Supreme Court.
So if you're keeping score at home, the Ford government has never won at any level in the court system. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct.
Now, okay, I admit this next question is going to be laden with a lot of hypotheticals here, but so get comfortable and hear me out. Right. If the Supreme Court's going to hear this case, by the time they hear this case, and by the time they decide on this case, the election's going to be over. And there will be a new cabinet installed, regardless of whether it's a progressive conservative cabinet or another party which wins the next election. All of which is to say, by the time these mandate letters ever do get revealed, if that's what the Supreme Court says, there's another if, these ministers aren't going to be the ministers of whatever they were the ministers of before, and this is all going to be pretty much, well, you tell me, irrelevant at that point or what?
Well, in terms of what was in those original mandate letters and their importance, it's probably irrelevant now. I think this is being fought for a bigger reason, and that is transparency, the public's right to information is something that all parties in opposition think is great. When they come to government, when they become government, suddenly they're not so sure that secrecy doesn't have its merits. And so I think what's at stake here is something very serious for the public. If the Supreme Court were to decide that the Ford government is correct, and the argument is that cabinet secrecy is like a big black hole, and anything that comes near the cabinet can be withheld from the public, then that will be a significant reduction in the amount of material to which the public has a rightful access. So a lot's at stake here, not so much about what was the content of those letters, but how expansive the notion of cabinet confidentiality is. So any document that may have gone to cabinet, any document resulting from cabinet discussions without revealing those discussions, or any document or policy that might in future come to cabinet could be excluded from being released to the public. And it's hard to understand how a democracy can be as vibrant and robust as it should be with that degree of secrecy permitted.
And just finally, if the Supreme Court, here we go, hypothetical again, if the Supreme Court decides in the way you would like it to decide and against the government of Ontario, that means they're going to have to make the letters public because there's no more appeals after that. Are you concerned at the end of the day this is going to be, as we call it in the business, a big nothing burger, and you'll be sitting there scratching your head saying, what the heck were they so concerned about? There's nothing here that's worth keeping secret anyway.
Well, I guess I've increasingly come to the view by their persistence that this isn't really about mandate letters. It's about how expansive the notion of cabinet secrecy and how much generally can be withheld from the public as a result of this exemption for cabinet secrecy. Is it the narrow vision of cabinet secrecy pertaining only to the deliberations of cabinet that is to be protected, as I think it should be protected? Or is it anything that comes anywhere near cabinet that can be excluded, which allows governments to hide all sorts of things that should be properly disclosed?
Gotcha. Jim, you better go take that call because we're out of time anyway. It's good of you to join us on TVO tonight. Thanks so much.
My pleasure, Steve. Bye-bye.
That's James Turk from Toronto Metropolitan University. And that is the agenda for Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. Tonight you heard from the parties on housing. Tomorrow we'll hear from housing experts about what voters should be asking of the candidates and government policy in the next House. Also, NDP leader Andrea Horwath will be with us on her party's bid for government. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is supported by the Ontario Real Estate Association. Ontario's 90,000 realtors are dedicated to finding a home for every Ontarian. And by viewers like you. Thank you.